It's time to quilt the strip of grass on row 4. The grass borders are on page 63. This is a piecing project, so I do not have my fabrics backed with interfacing. I will be using a 7 by 12 inch hoop, so I have 3 pieces of each fabric. If you'll be using a 5 by 7 inch hoop, you'll have 4 pieces of each fabric. Let's get started. Here you can see how I've hooped my muslin with the previous block still attached. I have the excess muslin hanging off the top of the hoop. This helps me save on my muslin, which I am using as my stabilizer. I will select Embroidery, go to my USB, and then to the Embroidery Files folder. I will scroll down to find the 8 by 8 grass template. If you will be using a smaller 5 by 7 hoop, you will choose the 5 by 7 grass template. Set the design and then click on Embroidery. I will move the design down to the bottom of the hoop and to the left to save on stabilizer. The first piece of fabric will be placed right side up. The next stitching will be a tack down and a placement line for the next piece of fabric. After this stitch is run, the fabric will be trimmed right next to the stitching line. Place the next piece of fabric right side down, right next to the stitching line. Then run the tack down line. Fold the fabric over and either press with an iron or finger press. I will continue these steps with the remaining strips of fabric. This block will be cut exactly on all of the stitching lines. I will start on the outside border and then cut the block into strips. The strips then need to be sewn together on the short ends, making sure to alternate the fabric. For me to quilt the entire strip of the pieced grass border. I'm using my 7 by 12 inch hoop, and as you notice, I have the excess muslin, which I use as my stabilizer, off to the right hand side instead of at the bottom or at the top of the hoop like I normally do. In order to quilt the entire strip, I will need to do 3 hoopings. The first hooping will be a 12-inch long design. The second will also be a 12-inch design. And then the third hooping will be a 7-inch design. And that will be enough to quilt our entire pieced border. I have batting cut into 1-inch strips, and I just cut several strips from some extra batting that I had. I will bring in the placement line for the fabric. It will be a long rectangle, and I will snug it up to the left side of the hoop so that this piece won't be wasted. Normally, if you cut a piece of stabilizer to fit your hoop, and if you're only going to quilt, say, 1 piece, normally all this would be wasted or have to use in a super small hoop. But because I have my excess batting, I can cut this when it's done quilting, and I haven't wasted all of this. I will select Embroidery, go to my USB, and then I will go to the Quilting Bundle folder. I will choose Plant 1 Border, block by block, and I will add the 1 by 12 design. I will hit Set and Embroidery. Now the design is automatically centered in the hoop, so I will select Layout and then Move, and using the arrow left, move it all the way to the left of the hoop. I will select OK. Then I'm going to the minus plus needle, and I am going to skip those first 2 steps, which are the placement for the batting, because we've already cut it to size, and the tack down of the batting. And I will run the placement for the fabric. I've sprayed the back of the batting, and I have placed it down the center of the placement for the fabric guide. The piece of batting was a little bit longer, so the excess just runs off to the bottom of the hoop. Now I will spray the back of the strip of fabric, and I will place it directly between the placement guides. The remaining strip of fabric is hanging off the bottom of the hoop. I will leave 1/4 of an inch at the top over the edge of the batting, and then I will tape the bottom and top in place. And now I will run the tack down of the fabric. Once the fabric is tacked down, I will run the quilting. You can see at the top where I have 1/4 inch of the fabric overhanging the batting. I'm going to use scissors and cut close to the strip of fabric to remove the excess muslin. And all that muslin to the right that was in the hoop would have been wasted if I had just cut the piece to size. But because it's on the strip of muslin, I can save it and use it in my next hooping. Here is a strip of batting that was cut a little bit longer. And here is the bottom placement line. I need to cut the excess muslin and batting off, and I need to be careful not to cut into my strip of fabric. I will fold the quilted piece back and cut the batting and cut the muslin. And I will trim the remaining muslin away from the strip. Here's the end or the top piece that does not have any stabilizer or muslin. That 1/4 inch will be sewn into the sides of the quilt. Here is the end of the batting of the first piece that we quilted. I'm going to hoop my muslin and get ready to quilt the second piece. I'm back at my machine. Here is the finished design that we just did. I will hit OK. And I need to just run it again, so I'm not going to move anything. It's all the way over to the left where I want it. I've rehooped. My stabilizer is to the right, and I'm going to run the placement for the fabric. So I just realized that I did not skip the first 2 steps. So the placement that just ran is actually the placement for the batting, which is fine. So I'm going to come back up. The step that it's on now is the tack down of the batting. Well, we're not going to do that because the batting is already cut to exactly 1 inch. So I'm going to go to the plus minus needle. I am going to skip that, and now it is the placement for the fabric, and I will show you, this is a good way to show you what would happen if you do need or feel like you want the placement for the batting. It's fine, it's just an extra step. So let's run the placement for the fabric now. So this is what the stitches will look like if you run the placement for the batting and then the placement for the fabric. We skipped the placement for the batting because it's just easy to take your batting, which I've sprayed with a little bit of adhesive, and just to eye it and run it down that center so that there's equal distance on this side. But again, it's something that you can do if you feel more comfortable because it does give you kind of an exact placement. Then I want to show you how we're going to line this up. So I have some spray on the back next 12 inches or so of my border. Now it's important, here's the top of my hoop. It's important that what we just stitched goes to the top of your hoop. If you were to put this towards the bottom of your hoop, your stitching is going to be opposite and your part of your grass is going to be upside down. So make sure that the top that has already been quilted goes to the top of your hoop. So we're going to have some hanging off the top and we're going to have some hanging off the bottom for this middle second strip. So we've got our placement of our batting. Now, here is the end of the batting and the muslin from our first quilted piece. We need to line this up with the top of the batting, so it's like the batting is one continuous strip. So the easy way is just to fold that back so that the quilted piece is on top, and just place that fold right to the top. So that fold, here's the end of our batting and our last piece that we quilted. I will just hold it there, flip this back. You could also, if you wanted to do it the opposite way, you could take it, there happens to be a seam right here, but here is the batting. We can nudge it right next to it so it's like one continuous strip. See if I can get a little bit closer. And then line up the outside edge of the fabric. I hope that makes sense. So here is the end of our quilting from last time, the end of our batting, and we're just going to butt it up right against the new batting. So again, so it's as if there's one continuous line of batting. Okay, so now I'll hold that. Now I can just make sure that the outsides are placed along the outside placement lines. Again, we'll have a little bit left. We have, remember, one more 7-inch strip to quilt. So this will be hanging off. And then, of course, my batting was a little bit longer. Here's the end. And that's fine. I'm going to tape right here and up here just to hold it. And it's going to quilt again. And it's just going to continue. So I'll go finish that and then give you a look. Here I have run the second 12-inch border strip. And if you can see, up here's where I have it taped. You might be able to see right here is the end, the top of the placement. So the batting or the stitching started right here, and it just looks continuous with how we placed it. So now I'm going to do the same thing one more time, except instead of a 12-inch border design, I'm just going to use a 7-inch to finish off just this last little piece. I'm on the last 7-inch piece of border. I could use a smaller hoop, but I'm just going to use 1 inch off that edge of the muslin. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep using the same 7 by 12 inch hoop. We finished with the 12 inch, so I'll hit OK. Now I'm going to go up here to home. I'm going to cancel because we're done. And then I will just go back to embroidery, my USB, back to the quilting bundle, and then the plant one border, block by block. And this time I'm going to get the 1 by 7 because that's all that we have left. I'll hit set and then embroidery. And I can move it down to the bottom and it'll just do that bottom towards the bottom. But the most important is to do it all the way to the left. Let's finish our last piece. I am going to go to the plus minus needle. I'm going to skip that first placement of the batting and the tack down of the batting. So I'm now ready to run the placement for the fabric. I'm doing this last piece in the hoop. I've placed my batting and I've made a fold right where the quilting and the batting from the last piece ended. So I can butt that, here's the batting, right up to the new piece of batting. Then I will put my fabric. I'm a little bit short right here, so I can see a little bit on this side. I will bring it to the end. I'm going to add some tape, and then I will run the tack down for this piece, and then run the quilting. It looks like my bobbin thread is almost empty. So I'm going to change it and finish up the quilting. So I changed my bobbin thread, and when you change your bobbin thread, it doesn't tack down when it starts the design like it does at the beginning or end of a design. So I'm going to go to this plus minus needle, and I'm going to go back, I think maybe 10 stitches. That will move the design back 10 stitches so that when I start the quilting, it will go over and kind of hold that piece that had to just be cut without being tacked down. Let's finish it up. So with 3 hoopings, we quilted the long strip of grass, and you can't tell where one quilting ends and the next one starts.